I got a new car, yeah. Oh! Today we're talking about conflict, specifically conflict in the books that we're reading, because every good story has good conflict. And what's conflict? It's a struggle between two opposing forces. In most cases, it's between our main character and another character or another force altogether. Now, we have two different types of conflict. We have external conflict, and that's the conflict that happens outside of ourselves. It's between a main character and an outside force. There's also internal conflict when a character is struggling with something inside of themselves. It could be anxiety or some sort of internal fear. Let's take a look at the three different types of external conflict that you're going to need to know for fourth grade. All right. The first type of conflict is probably the easiest conflict to remember, and that is character versus character. This is one of those situations when you have two characters in a story who are just having problems with each other. And it could be a big problem, it should be a big problem. There's also a situation where you have one character versus many different characters. For example, Stanley Yelnats versus all of the camp counselors and the warden. The next type of conflict is also pretty easy, and that's called character versus nature. And this is when your main character or a main character is having some sort of struggle between themselves and maybe some sort of weather, like a blizzard, predatory animal, or some sort of contagious disease, which we sure know about now, don't we? A great example of this is the movie Jaws. You have your character versus that big old shark. Last conflict is definitely the hardest conflict to find, and that's character versus society. And this is the kind of conflict where you have a character going against level 4. And this is going against a rule or a law or some sort of belief that's definitely not an okay belief. The character is fighting against society. While there are three types of external conflicts, there is only one type of internal conflict. Internal conflict is probably the most difficult conflict to see because it's happening within one of our characters' minds. You might see a character angry or sad, and sometimes because of the way it's narrated, you're not really sure what's going on. We know how the character feels because we can see it, but we're not really sure what that's all about. We have to use context to help us figure that out. Stanley Yelnats is a character who has a lot of internal conflict. He sees himself as overweight, and he sees himself as a character who gets bullied a lot, and he feels like he can't control his destiny. You know, he talks about his no good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather a bunch. And because of that, he has this internal conflict that he can't ever get a good break, which is what makes the conflict internal. Self-conflict. So every good story has a conflict. There are two types of conflict: external conflict that occurs outside of the character, and internal conflict that occurs within the character. There are three types of external conflicts, starting with character versus character, character versus nature, and the hardest one, character versus society. There is only one type of internal conflict, and that type of conflict is called character versus self, where the character is fighting some sort of internal demon. If you got that, you've got everything you need to know about conflict for Mr. Pete.